Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be presenting. My name is Janine Sitahal. I'm a veterinary officer in the Ministry of Agriculture. And today, along with my colleagues Luke Rostant, who is a lecturer at UE and also director in Trinidad, the Bat Conservation Group in Trinidad, and Robert Griffith, who's an anti-rabies assistant in the Ministry of Agriculture. We'll be presenting on bats and agriculture. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the amazing. So it goes into the ecological and economic importance of bats and talks a little bit about some issues that we commonly encounter with bats. Right. So I will just jump right in. I just want to advance this slide. Oh boy. Yes, now I'm trying to. Okay, here we go. So this is just to give you an overview of what we will be talking about in this presentation. Um, we'll go a little bit into the distribution of bats, their species, bats and ecosystem health. So we'll talk about pollination, seed dispersal, um, biological pest control, soil fertility and nutrient distribution, which would lead into guano harvesting, which falls under human to bat conflicts, vampire bats, bats in homes, of course, and human bat biting, and as well bat management. So bat management will be a theme we will try to incorporate throughout the presentation. So bats are a very diverse group that have evolved over millions of years, and they are the only mammals truly capable of flight. They are geographically ubiquitous, meaning they are found on all continents. This is except Antarctica. Um, there are more than 1,400 species recorded worldwide to date. And this represents about 25% of all mammalian species diversity. However, I must point out at the beginning here that bat populations continue to decline worldwide, with the primary cause of this being human activity, which includes the ongoing destruction of natural habitats, hunting and persecution for sport and meat. In other places, the growing use of wind turbine energy and the proliferation of harmful myths. So Trinidad and Tobago, being so close to the South American mainland, has the highest bat diversity of the Caribbean islands. We have about 69 species of bats between the two islands, so nearly 70, and these are identified from 9 families, and this is to date. Although bats are widely incorporated in our local culture and folklore, negative perceptions still pose a threat to our bat population through indiscriminate destruction. And this was compounded by the fact that all bats were legislatively listed as vermin until October 2016, when all but the two vampire bats, were removed from this list. So the many different species of bats have a wide range of diets with varied feeding habits, and these are responsible for their critical roles in ecological sustainability, and we'll talk a little bit about these now. So as essential pollinators, tropical bats provide invaluable support to the national economy. Nectar-feeding bats play important roles in pollination and take over the night shift from nectar-seeking birds such as hummingbirds. They transport and So they transport and transfer pollen from plant to plant when they travel between plants to feed, and this is in a similar fashion to birds and insects. However, bat pollinators can fly further and can transport pollen to more distant plants. In fact, they have been reported to move pollen up to 18 kilometers away from the home tree. Bats play a role in pollinating more than 500 different types of tropical plants, with over 300 species of food-producing plants benefiting from bat pollination. And this includes guavas, cocoa, mangoes, bananas, and figs. And in the case of bananas, you see here they're horizontal or they're drooping flowers are pollinated primarily by bats. So bats generally target large night blooming flowers, which are pale or white. So you can see some here, and these tend to give off strong scents as well. Examples of these include the local calabash tree, and of course the agave plant, which gives us, yes, folks, tequila. And this is the basis of a multi-million-dollar industry in Mexico. However, this is still just a fraction of the total economic value of bats in global pollination services, which is estimated at about 200 billion US dollars. So bats also assist in the dispersal of plant seeds to new locations, allowing them to take root and grow in novel environments. They do this in two ways, by ingesting fruit and expelling seeds after digestion. This dispersal method is so efficient that although the retention time in the bat is less than 20 minutes, it would have traveled a substantial distance, that is the bat, before expelling depulped seeds. And this often occurs in mid-flight. Another method of seed dispersal is the physical transport of fruit with their seeds away from the parent tree. And this is a common method used by the Jamaican fruit bat, who will disperse seeds up to 250 meters away from the parent tree. In this regard, bats are crucial to the survival of tropical forests by assisting in pollinating and dispersing seeds. They play an integral part in maintaining ecosystem health and have an extremely important role in forest regeneration. Because bats fly, they can transport seeds quite a distance before they drop them, as we noted in the previous slide. And this helps spread plants and facilitates the maintenance of tropical plant bat biodiversity by introducing seeds from outside areas and expanding the plant gene pools in geographically defined areas. So bats not only have ecological benefits, they also have economic benefits. Insectivorous bats play a significant role in the destruction of pests that destroy human crops and affect agricultural productivity. They effect control on a wide variety of insects, and these include some larval stages such as caterpillars, which can be major threats to agricultural crops. In the continental US alone, insectivorous bats are estimated to save farmers more than 3 billion US dollars each year due to destruction of agricultural pests that would otherwise cause a loss of crop and or involve the use of costly and potentially harmful chemical pesticides. So these four activities in turn promote food security by facilitating the propagation of agricultural crops and the sustainability of wild-type plant and animal genetic stock. Bats are also vitally important in controlling insect populations, and this includes many that pose significant nuisance problems as well as health threats to humans as vectors of diseases. Bats consume a variety of mosquitoes, and mosquitoes are among the most despised of insects. One bat can catch up to 1,000 mosquito-sized insects in a single hour. Mosquito population control aids in nuisance reduction and decreases the spread of mosquito-borne diseases such as Zika, dengue, malaria, yellow fever, and chikungunya. So bats are essentially a natural and inexpensive form of vector control. Yeah. So now for some fun facts. Insectivorous bats can consume more than 25% of their body mass of insects each night. And this can increase substantially according to the reproductive status of the bat. So for example, at peak lactation, a female Brazilian free-tailed bat consumes up to 70% of its body mass in insects each night. And this is done to meet the additional energy requirements associated with nursing. To put things in perspective, an average sized 14-gram bat can consume about 3 pounds of insects per year, or this equates to 21 pounds of insects in 7 years, which is which is a conservative estimate of the lifespan of one of these bats. And this is roughly equivalent to the maximum weight limit for hand luggage on a commercial airline. Bats also play an important ecological role in soil fertility and nutrient redistribution due to their relative high mobility and the use of different habitats for roosting and foraging. And they provide primary organic input to cave ecosystems to support endemic cave flora and fauna. And of course, bat guano is well known to be an excellent organic fertilizer. However, unregulated large-scale harvesting of bat guano, it does pose health risks, and this is mainly from the fungal spores which cause histoplasmosis in humans. If appropriate PPE, this is personal protective equipment, and appropriate precautions are not employed. Also, guano should not be harvested when the bats are present. That's the bats are sleeping or roosting, as it causes unnecessary disturbance of the bat roost, and this can cause displacement of bat colonies to other areas, which may in turn lead to increased human-to-bat contact. And I've also put in a little useful quote here from the Bat Conservation International page, and this speaks to environmental responsibility. So all things in nature have a purpose, and our challenge is to understand the value of these natural gifts and use them responsibly. So that being said, humans also present multiple other threats to bats. One major threat that bats face is from urbanization. As humans encroach on natural habitats of bats, we cause many bats to be displaced from their shelters and infringe on their natural foraging areas as well. So these result in these bats seeking alternate shelters and food sources, which then results in increased human-to-bat interactions and potential conflicts. So one of the best-known examples of human-to-bat conflict is the interaction of vampire bats and livestock. And this results from the specialized feeding activity of 3 species of bats, which are only found in Latin America and Trinidad. So this is the range of these bats here. 2 species of these vampire bats are found, they occur in Trinidad, not Tobago. There are no vampire bats in Tobago found to date. With the Desmodus rotundus, this little bat here, or the common vampire bat, as its name suggests, being the most common. Indigenous wildlife were the original prey of these bats before the introduction of domestic livestock with European colonization. So domestic livestock then, due to their large size, relative abundance, and stationary grazing behavior, presented a consistent and reliable food source, which these highly adaptable and efficient predators use to their advantage. Also, other human activity, example, the development of roads and farms through or near forested areas, this brings these bats into closer contact with both humans and domestic animals. So cattle are the preferred prey of the Desmodus vampire bats, and consequently, they can pose a major constraint to the cattle industry when vampire bat populations are high. So frequent biting can cause lower mass gain for beef animals and lower milk yield for dairy animals. And this is on account of stress, blood loss, secondary wound infections, and possibly disease transmission. One such disease that can be transmitted from vampire bats is rabies. Historically, bat-transmitted paralytic rabies was first identified in Trinidad, and this was during a large epidemic in the early 20th century, during which rabies prevalence in bats was around 3%. And there was a loss of about 80 human lives and thousands of cases of animals across the island. So you can see in this graph here the estimated number of cases for this period, this early period, and you can see the distribution of cases across the island. Currently, the rabies prevalence rates in Trinidad, the Trinidadian bat population is typically less than 1%. And we still have sporadic spillover to the livestock, but this occurs primarily in the southwest and northeast areas of the island. So you can see the clear difference from, let's say, the 20s and 30s situation to present day. So as a result of this history, Trinidad was the first country to administer a government program for the control of vampire bats. The Bat Control Unit was first established in 1934, and this was under the Colonial Medical Department, because we are still a colony. But due to the absence of human rabies cases since 1937, it was later relocated to the Ministry of Agriculture, where it currently resides as the Anti-Rabies Unit. Vampire bat population control activities are based on studies of bat behavior and feeding habits, and the feeding habits of these bats. For which knowledge is still evolving, we must note. So this is really an ongoing science. And as I've mentioned, these bats also exist in Latin America, where the problem is much more extensive given their land boundaries. And varying levels of control are implemented by these countries on the mainland according to the prevailing conditions therein. So viewed as an agricultural pest, the value of vampire bats to biodiversity and potential medicinal uses are not often brought to light or even known, when in fact the vampire bat venom contains two anticoagulant glycoproteins and a vasodilatory peptide. These are compounds that are currently being explored for their medicinal use in human stroke victims and for cardiac and kidney patients. So these surprising discoveries of drug candidates illustrate why it is broadly important to protect nature and the value of genetic conservation for all creatures. But while vampire bat culling can pose a challenge to the conservation of biodiversity, currently no known feasible alternatives to their population control is known. But it is agreed that more ecologically sustainable approaches to population control should definitely be invested for the long term, and these could include selective culling, reproductive control, or other prey management strategies that selectively exclude populations from being predated upon. So as mentioned earlier, with urban development, bats continue to lose their natural homes in trees, caves, and other areas. Bats are living creatures and need a safe, dry place to rest. So they will seek alternative shelters, with the most abundant and accessible being man-made structures. Bats are small and can squeeze through small cracks and crevices. So if they see an opening, there's a good chance that they would take it. But roosting in an occupied building increases the potential that bats can come in contact and come into conflict with humans. And unfortunately, many humans would rather harm bats than have them removed safely. At this point, I will pass you on to my colleague, Robert Griffith, who will discuss a little bit more about bat deterrents. I'll advance the slides.
Thank you, Dr. Sital, and good afternoon to everyone. As Dr. Sital said, the bats, because of our urbanization, are inclined now to go into buildings. So we have had instances where bats have been in schools, in health centers, and quite often there are also bats are in residence. And so given that bats are so important to the ecology, that what we would like to do is have humane bat deterrents. We have had instances of persons burning trees, destroying the bats, or or even attempting to destroy them when they come into their homes. So what we would like to do is to give you some knowledge as to what bat deterrent techniques are humane. Bat deterrent techniques would depend on the type of bats and what would attract them to your property in the first place. To avoid attracting insect bats, turn off unnecessary outside lights at night, or consider replacing outside light bulbs with yellow bulb bulbs to discourage insects, which in turn will discourage the bats that prey on the insects. However, this is a trade-off. As remember, having insect bats around may be to your advantage for natural mosquito control. However, you must work out which is the one that you find most important. Fruit bats will be attracted to trees bearing fruits. Already we pointed out the benefits of seed dispersal and pollination. But if they are causing significant damage to your building, you can remove fruit sources from your garden, or if you are particularly bonded to your fruit trees, you can install light grids over them or hang reflective items such as strips of foil or old CDs. And some general deterrents include the use of essential oils, and there are now being sold sound emitting devices. All of these measures you can look at to ensure that the bats are not as disruptive around your residence as they normally are. Slide 24. You can prevent bats from coming indoors, and this is very important, by keeping doors and windows without screens closed at all times, particularly during evening hours when the bats are active and during fruiting season. And of course, prevention is always better than cure. So your house design on construction, at the point of construction, will become essential in determining the attractiveness to bats to enter your premises. If your house is already built with existing structures, you can seal off holes, cracks, and gaps, and put screening onto vents and overhanging eaves. An essential point here to note is that buildings should be inspected for bat activity prior to any maintenance or exclusion activity. So the Anti-Rabies Unit would very well come if you believe that there is a situation, and to look and to point out to you where the bats are entering, or if there is a problem with bats at your property. Exclusions. Exclusion should also generally be done outside of the maternity season of the bats, as non-flying young bats can become trapped inside and will either die or find deeper entry into the interior of your building, so that they're in and they're in to stay. When inspecting for activity, what we want you to do is to note for the rub marks. The rub marks will be the place that the bat's body comes into contact with the eave of your house around entrance holes or roosting sites. These look like dark or oily smudges where body oils and dust rub off, and urine stains may also be present at roosting sites. Slide 25. A bat lying on the ground. We're discussing now if you see bats and they may not be sick, because the bat is a very shy animal and will attempt to stay away from human contact. So what we're looking for is abnormal bat behavior. A bat lying on the ground or low on the wall is abnormal behavior and may indicate that that bat is sick. Rabbit bats are more prone to daytime activity and generally less likely to flee at the approach of a human. A healthy bat would rarely be in a position where it could be picked up. So that's why they are shy animals. They would move away from you. What is important to note here is that the behaviors described on this slide are not always present in or exclusive to rabbit bats, but they do increase the potential for human encounters with sick bats. This is particularly true when it comes to children who are naturally curious and want to touch these bats. So it is always important, teach your children never to handle an unfamiliar animal, especially wildlife, and to avoid unnecessary contacts or handling of any bat. I know that some persons find them cute and that their fur is silky, so I have seen pictures of persons holding them. This is not advisable. And also, we would like you to report any sighting of bats that are displaying these abnormal behavior to the Anti-Rabies Unit. And if advised, to please submit for testing. If you have seen bats that have fallen or died in your premises, please submit for testing. But the most important thing, get in touch with the Anti-Rabies Unit. Okay, we're going to slide 26. If bitten by a bat, wash the wound with soap and running water for at least 5 minutes. If unfortunately you've held a bat or you know someone has done this, immediately wash the wound with soap and running water for at least 5 minutes. Immediately report the incident and submit the bat for testing if available. Get in touch with the Anti-Rabies Unit. We will come to give you an immediate visit to assess the situation, so that you are to report the incident to the Anti-Rabies Unit and also to the Veterinary Public Health Unit. Seek medical attention as soon as possible to access post-exposure rabies vaccination. And as we go to slide 27, the slide 27 gives you an indication of how the country has been divided into 4 quadrants for us to manage the rabies situation in Trinidad and Tobago. All matters concerning bats, you can, as I said again, you can get in touch with the Anti-Rabies Unit. The Northwest Subunit, you can get in touch with us in the Caroni office, 672-4411, or St. George office at 662-5986. The Southwest Unit, you can get in touch with us at the Cregnish office at 655-8110, or the Penal Demonstration Station, 647-4672. In the Northeast Subunit, it's El Reposo Demonstration Station. The number is 668-2712. And at the Wallerfield Outstation, 667-8488. And in the Southeast Unit, you can contact the Anti-Rabies Unit and Rio Claro Demonstration Station at 644-2326 or 644-2882. I would now like to hand you over to Dr. Luke Rostand, who will continue with the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffith. So what I want to chat about for a little while now is the topic of environmental education with regards to bats. It's something I'm very, very passionate about. Now, there is quite a bit of misinformation swirling about with regards to bats. Much of the public tends to have a phobia of bats, and just judging by some of the comments that I'm seeing on the Facebook live chat, I'm already seeing that a lot of bats are seen in a negative light. Now, I hope that we can help answer some of your questions about dealing with problem bats afterwards. But I do hope now that you've gotten a lot of this presentation from Dr. Sita Hal that you have hopefully a more positive view about bats and why they're important. Now, a lot of the phobias that we see, these could have arisen through misconceptions of these animals. It could have arisen through a bias where people see bats as different and somewhat scary. I love bats, and even I have to admit they do look quite strange. But a lot of the strangeness in their faces is associated with the evolutionary appendages that they've developed in order to carry out echolocation. They're also quite mysterious, right? They fly around at night, and usually things that are nocturnal in nature, people tend to be a bit more scared of course. Of course, in Trinidad, we also have quite a rich tapestry in terms of folklore and superstition, and that can also be quite an obstacle that affects people's opinions of bats, okay, and therefore would affect conservation. So what we try to do at Trinibats is we try to undertake some environmental education activities We consider this to be a really important step in order to create a more harmonious coexistence between humans and bats, and to hopefully mitigate impending conflicts between humanity and nature. Okay, so in this slide, you see a few pictures of some of our activities. You see at the top right there, that's one of our directors, Daniel Hargreaves, one of the founders of Trinibats. He's actually holding a bat out and showing a young person. I think it's a nectivorous bat that he has. Top left, that is one of our heroes. That's Merlin, a caricature of Merlin Tuttle. If you don't know him, I urge you to check him out. He's really quite an impressive fellow. And then at the bottom, I go to schools and I talk about bats and I demonstrate what the different kinds of bats are and why they're important. So we do try to hopefully change perceptions about bats and explain to people that yes, while you may be experiencing human bat conflict, they are integral parts of the ecosystems that we share with them. Okay, so if you would like more information on Trinidad and Tobago bats specifically, I urge you to go to the Trinibats website. We also have a Facebook page. You can go there. There's information on all of the bats in Trinidad and Tobago. There's also information on advice on how to how to resolve issues you might be having. I know the number one question we always get is, I might not mind bats, but I really don't want them in my house. How do I get them out of my house? So if you see that there's actually a section there entitled Bats in Houses, where we give certain pointers on how to successfully and humanely remove bats from your house. Finally, if you're really, really interested in bats and you're kind of a naturalist at heart, I urge you to check out the Bats of Trinidad and Tobago book. This has been really expertly written by Jeffrey Gomes with illustration by Fiona Reed, and it's an excellent resource. And wider information on bats in general can be found from several resources. There's EcoHealth Alliance that has a nice page dedicated to living safely with bats, Bat Conservation International, and then of course there's RELCOM, which is the Latin American consortium of NGOs and so on that do a lot of research and education in bats. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. And I guess I'll pass back on to Dr. Sita.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Robert. So I just got and thank you for listening. So I just got a chance to look through some of the comments on Facebook, and I see a lot of how do I get rid of bats from my house, how to get them away from my house. And I think we really covered that within the presentation. And as Luke said, there are other resources that you can read up on for additional information on that. No, human bat biting is not where humans bite bats. It's the other way around. I think those are the questions I'm seeing. Is there anything you see on your side, or lots of people telling you, hello, Luke, that you think we should address outside of what was the content of the presentation?
Just as an addition to what was spoken about in the presentation, I have, with regards to trying to dissuade bats from setting up roosts, so to speak. I have heard some people, I don't know how successful they have been, but they've told me that they've had some success with using things like car deodorants or something that will actually emit a spray, like those things like lavender or eucalyptus oils, essential
Yes.
oils I think were mentioned. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's not to spray it and leave it. If you actually have something that can dispense, like give off a spray, You know, there are those automatic dispensers that give off a spray every few minutes or so. If you're having an issue with bats, I've heard some people having some success by putting the essential oils into those kinds of dispensers and leaving it for some time, and that dissuades the bats from coming back. With regards to humanely removing them, it's also important that, you know, if you're going to seal up the hole, you can also put in what we call bat exclusion devices, which are described on the Trinidad's Facebook page. So it's basically an L-shaped piece of pipe that you put in the hole wherever they're coming from, and the bats are able to leave, but they can't come back in. That's the idea. So you can check out those as well.
Great. Robert, do you have anything you think should be said about, because the main questions here are bats in houses. Anything else in addition to what was said before that you think worthwhile mentioning?
Well, what is worth mentioning is that for many years, the Anti-Rabies Unit have been visiting persons' residences to deal with these particular problems, so that it is for persons to take note of the numbers that we gave, call into those numbers, and an officer will be able to visit your premises and to give you some information as to what you can do to resolve the problem. So that's it. So please get in touch with the unit. We are more than willing to help you with these situations.
Very good point. Janine, I don't know if it's possible, but perhaps we could put the numbers in the chat, in the comment section, or bring up the slide just so that people can take it down one last time if they need to.
I think I'm seeing on Facebook that it's brought up.
Okay, great.
It's on. Yeah, we just
Awesome.
can't see it there. So, well, I think that's about it. Yes.
And
Yes.
just
So, go on.
sorry, I was seeing one question from Deodath asking about designs for bat houses. It's something that we're in Trinidad we are currently doing work on. We have a few bat houses out. I haven't had too much success. But if you want, Deodath, just get in touch with me and I can guide you on that. And I think Jalaluddin Khan had a last comment there.
Okay. Are they protected, and what is the legal penalty? Great. So, as I mentioned on one of the slides, bats up until 2016 were considered vermin. In October 2016, they were taken off the vermin list. So, in regard, Luke, in regard to the protection status of bats by extension of not being on the vermin list, is that alluding to protection, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
right?
All bats but for vampire bats have been removed from the vermin list, which means that they have legal protected status now. I would have to check and see what the penalty might be. But it would be the same penalty that would be applied if you're caught harming any of the species that happen not to be on the vermin species list. So, for example, a lot of snakes people consider to be vermin, but they're not actually vermin. It's illegal to kill a lot of those snake species, and there are penalties that can accrue. So yes, all bats, but for the 2 species of vampire bat that we are confirmed to have in Trinidad, are in fact protected.
And another question there was, how many do we have on both islands? So
well,
you can speak a little bit about the Tobago part. Yeah,
so,
because you all recently.
So in Trinidad we have I would say roughly about 70 odd species. I say roughly because I imagine in time we may find more.
Yeah.
In Tobago, to date, we found maybe approximately about 24 odd species. And interestingly enough, even though it's a volant animal, meaning that it flies, a bat is the first endemic mammalian species that we've found in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's found in Tobago.
Typical.
That's the Trinbagonian Myotis attenboroughi.
Yeah.
So kudos to bats once
Yeah.
again.
And that was a recent find, so who knows what we'll find next year,
Exactly.
year after.
A lot like you. I mean, Janine has done a lot of the genetic work on some of the bats and so on. But there's a lot to be done. So there may be more species out there, more unique species to Trinidad and Tobago. Number 3, you want to tackle that one? Well, I thought, I kind of described some of those resources. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not to tout Jeffrey's book too much, but it really is the best resource in my mind. If you want to learn about local bats, there are many other publications, of course. There's a lot being distributed by Bat Conservation Trust, for example. There's a lot of publications that are specific to the neotropics. But the best starting point I would recommend would be the bats of Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of protecting and conserving bats, I think what we're doing right now is critical. This is where it all starts. It starts with education and a deeper appreciation for the role that bats play. In terms of conservation, I think Trinidadians and Tobagonians tend to have an attitude of, if it's giving me trouble, I'm just going to get rid of it and kill it by any means necessary. So I think that we need to educate more on the humane removal of bats from residencies, especially. I think that's the main problem. It's again coming out in the chat. In terms of habitats and ecosystems, we need to conserve as much forest ecosystem as we can, develop that parks and protected areas network, and even seemingly innocuous things, like, for example, in the periodic block system, where they tend to remove hollow trees and so on to enrich the forest. Those hollow trees are really critical for bat roosting and for bat populations. So by us removing those hollow trees, we're actually doing more harm than good in certain cases. So there's a lot that can be done, and I guess it all starts with a discussion about the importance of bats, which y'all are starting today.
Yeah, I think it's really like a change in mentality towards a change in behavior. And one thing to note there is protecting these habitats, and what it not only benefits bats, it also benefits other wildlife. And it can sustain I guess we have hunting seasons, sustain the wildlife for future hunting seasons, and for economic growth as well. We could probably mention where we can get the Bats of Trinidad and Tobago book for those who want to read it. So it's available through the Field Naturalist Club still?
Yes, it is. Of course, we are currently under a bit of a lockdown, so it's going to be a little bit of a wait until you can get them.
Sure. And then there's the Trinidad's website, so we can.
Trinidad's website as a resource. I think, Johnny, you might be the best person to answer the last question that's being asked there. I think it's Joy Edwards.
So I don't see it.
The question is are bat droppings a hazard to our health?
So I would say it's really about exposure levels and context. So if a bat is, you're outdoors and a bat flies by and like, it drops on the floor in front of you, that's not really a significant risk to your health. Whereas if we're looking at bats roosting in your roof and the, the powdered guano coming through the roof, that certainly poses more of a risk than the scenario we spoke about just now. So it's really about contact, proximity, and things like that. But yes, we mentioned guano. Bat guano has like fungal spores, so this is present in bird droppings as well, and in the enclosed settings, it inhalation can cause health risks, and one of those effects would be histoplasmosis, which is a respiratory disease. Yeah. So that's one of the main things. I think. Yeah.
I got cut off there a little while, so I'm now back in.
Okay. So is there any other question because I still didn't see that question that you can see?
Well, I'm just seeing the last one was just asking whether or not whether there were numbers that somebody could call to get advice or assistance in removal of bats, and I pointed them to the Facebook page.
Okay.
Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Okay. Yes. Sure.
I'm saying Mr. Chidi asked he said if there are a lot of bat droppings around the house, could this be a health hazard? So I believe that we could just advise him as to how to clean the place, just using disinfectant and keeping the place washed.
Yes, and well, bat deterrents to prevent large numbers of bats from congregating.
Yes.
So. All right, so I think that should be it. So thank you once again. And is there something I need to do from my side to log off? I'm not sure. Do I just end? Can IT advise? Okay. So, okay, for all those listening, thank you for joining us. The numbers are available for reporting human to bat conflict, available on the ministry's website. For further information, as Luke mentioned, you can look at the Trinidad's website, source the Bats of Trinidad and Tobago book. You can contact either the Anti-Rabies Unit or Trinidad for any of your bat concerns. Thanks again, and that's it. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, thanks all. It's been a really nice chatting with everybody, and I hope that everyone has a deeper appreciation for bats and why they're important.
Definitely. Okay. Bye.